Hello and welcome to the AI for All hackathon. I'm going to show you how you can use the ZEBEDEE API. Hopefully that will help you with your hackathon project, and it's really easy to use. I'm going to show how we can use it in a Bomberman game, as you can see from the slides here. So just a little bit of a background. So ZEBEDEE is a company that allows you to integrate Bitcoin into your game or application. We have a very easy to use API which will let you receive Bitcoin, let you send Bitcoin, and we want to make it really easy for game developers and other application developers to not have to worry about all the complexities about Bitcoin and the Lightning Network, and just to be able to stream money and send money in their games easily. So hopefully this little workshop will show you how easy it is and um, give you a starting point to help you get started with the API and hopefully integrate it into your hackathon project. As I mentioned before, the game we're going to look at today is Bomberman. The reason I chose Bomberman is it's an existing game, everybody kind of knows the game. There's a bunch of simple open source implementations, and it's really easy to add Bitcoin to it via the ZEBEDEE API. So what I basically did, I found an open source JavaScript Bomberman repo. I altered the repository a little bit to kind of add like little Bitcoin coin sprites in the game. And the source code can be found here, but I'll explain that in a little bit more. But what we're going to look at in this little workshop is we have this Bomberman game. We're just going to do two simple things. We're going to add a Bitcoin paywall, so you have to pay to play, and then we're going to add Bitcoin rewards. So after the user pays to play, the game will send them Bitcoin. And it's so simple. I'm hopefully going to do this in under 30 minutes. My record for doing this is in 10 or 15 minutes, so that's how easy it is. Anyway, the tools we're going to use is we need the ZEBEDEE wallet or another, like any Lightning wallet will do, but I recommend the ZEBEDEE wallet for the smoothest experience. You can just get this at zbd.gg. zbd.gg. It's available in the App Store and on Google Play. You need to go to the ZEBEDEE dashboard and you need to make an account. So this is going to be your developer account at ZEBEDEE, where you'll be able to have a developer wallet to send and receive Bitcoin, and also have an API key to use the ZEBEDEE API. So I've already got an account here, but it's really easy to make an account. You just go to that link there. You can sign up. You can use the invite code Lightning. If this code doesn't work at time of recording, I'm sure there'll be another code that you can use to sign up. And we'll try and reference that new code in the video description. We also need to go to the documentation. So this tells you how to use the ZEBEDEE API, all the different API calls we have here. And yeah, that's basically it. We're also going to be using something called the LN URL protocol, which you don't have to worry about exactly what that means, but this just lets games and wallets kind of scan QR codes and kind of send Bitcoin and get Bitcoin sent to them. But this is all supported by the ZEBEDEE API. Anyway, let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to clone the Bomberman repository. So I'm just going to copy and paste this, and I'm going to clone it. So I'm going to give the link to these slides afterwards, but if you can read this, it's at github.com, mandel monkey bitcoin bomberman.git. So I will just copy and paste that, and there we go. It's cloned into my repository. So next step is I'm going to just cd into this repository, and I need to check out the let me just zoom in a little bit here. I'm going to check out the workshop branch. So git check out workshop. Yep. So let's just open this up in an IDE. So I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. So open the folder where that repository exists. So it should be in here. Yeah, Bitcoin Bomberman. And I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. Should be a bit easier to read. There we go. Okay, so this is my repository here. So this is just like a boilerplate JavaScript game. I didn't really make this. I just changed some of the images. I added like a Bitcoin image to it. There we go. But most of the code we will be looking at is in the JavaScript folder here, specifically the withdraw.js and the paywall.js. But let's head back to our slides. I also need to make sure I have Bower and Simple HTTP Server installed. So these are really easy to install. If you need to have npm node package manager install. This is, you can Google how to install Node and npm on your OS. Really simple. These are basic developer tools. So I'm just going to go, I'm in my repository here, and I'm going to install Bower and Simple HTTP Server. These are just things that will let us run this JavaScript game in the browser. So just give that a few seconds to install. And let's see if I can zoom in on this as well, actually. Okay, next step I need to do Bower install. So this isn't the exciting Bitcoin stuff at the moment. This is just some boilerplate stuff to get the game running. Okay, now I also need to add my ZEBEDEE API key to the project, and I also need to run the game, and then it'll appear in my browser at this address, which is localhost. But let's just have a look at this step first. Add your ZEBEDEE API key to js config.js. So as we said before, we basically have a developer API. This is a simple REST API. You can do stuff like create invoices. It's ZEBEDEE, we call them charges, but it's an invoice in Lightning terms. We call them charges because it's a bit more friendly to game developers who aren't really used to Bitcoin. Invoice is a little bit confusing, but they kind of charge. They're kind of adding Bitcoin. They're charging Bitcoin. That's where that comes from. But these are basic invoices. We have a very extensive API, so we're not going to go through everything today. But we are going to be looking at creating charges and also creating withdrawal requests. But this is our API. But to use the API, we need an API key, as you can see here. We need an API key. So we go to our developer dashboard. I think, yeah. So you should sign into the developer dashboard, use invite code Lightning, or if this code doesn't work, we'll supply another code. And then we basically need to create a project. So I've created a project already. So it's really easy to make a project. You just type the name of your project, like hackathon. You give a description about what it is, and that's basically all you need to do. I created one already. And once you've made a project, this shows the project has its own Bitcoin Lightning wallet. So if anybody is playing your game and they kind of pay to play your game, the Bitcoin will go in here. And then when your game sends Bitcoin to players, it'll come from here. So I've used this project before, so we see a lot of payments going to people. That's what that is there, but it shows a list of transactions that your project has made. But we're just going to head over to the API section here. We're going to, it'll show you your API key here. You can copy it, you can download it, you can regenerate it. I'm just going to copy this one here. And we want to put it in js.config.js. So if we go back to our project, js config.js, add your ZEBEDEE API key here. Okay. Let's head back to here. Now we need to run the server. So simple HTTP server. And the game should actually start. And a little tab should open up. Okay, so we need to launch it here. And hopefully, there we go. We have a Bomberman here. It's saying pay 10 sats to play. For some reason, the QR code hasn't loaded, but we'll debug this in a little while and see what's going on. Okay, anyway, so this is your game, should be running now. But I guess, sorry, it's not, so we're trying to add a paywall here. So this is what we're going to do next. So the game is running, it's a simple Bomberman game, but we want the user to pay 10 sats to play. So let's have a look at that. So the first thing we want to look at is we want to look at paywall.js, create the paywall. And here we're going to look at the create invoice function. So let's go over to paywall.js. And so this is a very simple function. So I've written this kind of code a little bit before just to speed it up. But basically what we want to do is we want to create an invoice that the user is going to pay. We want to check if that invoice is paid. And if the invoice is paid, we want to start the game. So this is all empty at the moment. So let's look at how we can use the ZEBEDEE API to add a paywall to this Bomberman game. So first thing we need to do is we need to make a request to the charges endpoint. So if we look here, if we can see, can I zoom in a little bit? There we can look here. We need to basically make a HTTP request. This is a standard JavaScript HTTP request to the charges API. That API is documented here, create charge. And then we get the response of that, and we create a QR code from that response that you'll be able to scan with a Lightning wallet. So because I don't want to have to kind of type this all out, because it's going to be boring to see me type this out, I'm just going to cheat it a little bit, and I am going to, let me zoom back out again. I'm just going to copy and paste some of the code. So if you head over to the Git repo, we should be able just to copy and paste it. So we go over to the workshop branch. I go over to paywall.js. Nope, no, that's not the right one. I think I need to go over to the master branch. And I believe this should have the completed code. Yep, there we go. So in the master branch contains the completed project. The workshop branch contains the Bitcoin stuff missing. So we're going to basically add in a create invoice function, a simple HTTP request to the ZEBEDEE API to make an invoice for 10 sats. And then we're going to check the status of that invoice to see when it's paid. And when it's paid, we are going to start the game. So let's just copy and paste this. And I'll explain a little bit what it's doing. Yep, this is the ZEBEDEE API URL. We have to pass some post data, the expiry time. So the invoice will be alive for 300 seconds. After that, the user won't be able to pay it. It will be expired. The amount. So we have a fee. So the fee is in config. So config.fee is 10. So 10 sats. The ZEBEDEE API takes millisats. So we have to times it by 1,000. So here we're actually doing 10,000 millisats, which is 10 sats. You can add a description to the invoice, and you can also add an internal ID. This stuff isn't too important. The callback URL isn't too important, but just explain what this does. If you have a server, once the invoice is paid, the ZEBEDEE API will send an event to your server to tell you that it's paid. But we're not going to use that for this tutorial because it's going to take a few hours to set up a server, and it's a bit beyond the scope for a hackathon project. Anyway, that's how simple it is. It's a post API. It's a post request to the ZEBEDEE API. Important things are the expiry time, 300. You can set it to whatever. The amount in millisats. So those are the two things there. So if we do that, I think we should get a QR code that loads. There we go. That's how simple it is to add a paywall. So we have a QR code that now loads. So I'm just going to try and pay it. And we'll notice that, let me open my ZEBEDEE wallet. You can see here, it's visible. I'm going to scan this. And I'm not sure if you can see that, but it's ready for 10 sats. I'm going to confirm and pay. It's paid it, but the QR code is still there. So we've managed to generate an invoice, but the game isn't checking that it's paid. So let's look at checking when it's paid, and when it's paid, we can actually start the game. So that is very, very simple. We just need to look at, we need to, so sorry. I've gone a bit too fast, but here's some code where we pass the response and make a QR code. So I'll just quickly talk about that. So we get the response from the HTTP request, we pass it. We are getting the ID of the invoice, or charge as we call it. And that's going to be used to check the status of it. And here we also create a QR code for the invoice. So I'm just using some generic JavaScript QR code library. But the important thing here, from the response, we have data, and data.data.invoice.request. That is what we are making a QR code out of. So I think if we possibly look at, and we're not logging it out here, but what you can actually do is when the response happens, let's just log out what we're actually getting, and it'll make a little bit more sense. So we go, yeah. So as you can see here, so this is the response we are getting. I'll just copy and paste this and just view it in something a bit more human readable. So this is the response we're getting. So data, invoice, request, and we're making a QR code out of this here. It's a little bit hard to see, but this is what the API returns. So we can see the amount in millisats, the description, everything we basically set. Its status is still pending. Anyway, let's go back to looking at how we can actually check if it's paid. So this is very simple as well. So we want to check payment and we remove the paywall. So we're going to do simple polling the charges get endpoint with the charge invoice ID. If the status is completed, we'll start the game. If it's pending, we'll check again. This is a kind of simple way to do it. You basically just every 2 seconds, we're just calling an API which checks the status of an invoice via the invoice ID that we made note of here. Ideally, in a real project, you would use the callback URL because it's more efficient, but this requires you to have a server, etc., etc. But we're just going to do some polling, as it's called. And the API, the code is very, very similar. Instead of a post request, it's a get request now. So let's just do a little bit of copy and paste. So here's the check payment function. Just paste that there. So we're calling the charges. It's the same endpoint charges, but here we append the charge ID, and now it's get. And this basically, the response we get is pretty much the same as this. We actually get the invoice object, and status will be different if it's paid. So we can actually have a look at this. So let's just let's log out the response text as well. Okay, and if we reload, so we should see every 2 seconds. Yep, it's getting the charge details. Status is pending. But if we pay this one now, it should in a second or two. Yep, it has disappeared because we can see in the last one If I just copy and paste this, the status has changed to completed. So that's a very simple way that we can check the status. And where I've lost my Bomberman. There we go. Yep. And now the game, we're allowed to press the game. So I'll press single player. I can't remember the buttons. What are the buttons? Okay, yeah, move spacebar to plant the bomb. So I'm playing the game now. So this is a very, very simple game. As you blow up the walls, a Bitcoin will appear. So when I get a coin, my balance increases. So I've got 10 sats now. And then at the end of the game, I can withdraw. There we go. I've got a bunch more coins here. So what I want to do next is now we want to be able to withdraw the sats we are getting here. So when I press withdraw, it does nothing. So that's the next step we're going to be looking at. Level 2, Bitcoin rewards. Among power-ups, there are now Bitcoins hidden in the wall. When a player gets one, let's keep a total and let the user withdraw. So just a recap of what we've just done. We added the paywall. It's very, very simple. It's basically two API calls, one to make an invoice or a charge, as we call them at ZEBEDEE, and another one to check the status of the charge every 2 seconds. Next, we are going to add a little bit more code with a slightly different API where we can show a QR code that the user can scan with their Bitcoin Lightning wallet and actually get the sats. So instead of the player sending Bitcoin to the game can now send Bitcoin to the player. And this is also very, very simple. What have I done here? So yeah, so I've added all the kind of code to, detect when you get a coin. You can feel free to take a look at that in player.js. But let's look at the actual Bitcoin side of things. So let's go to js.withdraw.js. So that is here. So we basically have two empty functions. So we want to create a withdraw ln URL and then check the withdraw. So a withdraw ln URL. So ln URL was a protocol that was made, which basically, when Lightning first came out, there was APIs to make invoices, so you could pay things, but there was no way to for the player to easily have a game send them Bitcoin. In the first Lightning games, what the game had to do is the game had to tell the player to make an invoice, then the player had to paste the invoice, copy and paste the invoice from their Lightning wallet into the game, and then the game would pay the invoice. So it was like horrible UI and UX. So the LN URL guys came up with ln URL withdraw, which basically does the same thing. The game actually requests the user to make an invoice, but the user doesn't have to manually do it. Behind the scenes, the user's wallet and the games talk to each other, and the user doesn't notice this, but it happens very, very quickly. The game is just saying, hey, make an invoice for this amount and send it to me and I'll pay it. But it's all kind of hidden and abstracted, so you don't have to worry about that. But let's just have a look at this code. So I'm going to go back to my Git where I've got the complete code. And let's copy and paste this and just have a look at what this code is doing. So this is using the ZEBEDEE API. Where's my API? Withdrawal requests. So it's the create withdrawal request. So all the documentation is here. But the endpoint is here. Withdrawal request. It's a post request, and the payload is basically the same as the invoice. We have an expiry time. We have an amount in millisats. So this is the total sats the user has collected times 1000. We have a description and we have a callback URL, which the ZEBEDEE server will ping this URL with details of the status, but we're not going to look at that for this hackathon. We're going to do it exactly as we did with the paywall, and we're going to poll. But this is basically, the same structure request, very, very simple to use. We get, well, this says charge ID, but it's not a charge ID this time. It's actually a withdraw ID, but it doesn't matter. It's an ID that we can identify the withdrawal request. But that's all we have to do. It's very, very simple. So let's just reload the game. So I'm going to have to pay again. Single player. Let me just quickly get some coins. And now when I press withdraw, it should actually make a QR code that the wallet can scan. There's no coins. Man, there are no coins. I'm unlucky. Oh, there's a coin. Okay. So I've got 10 sats. I'll press withdraw. And we've got a QR code. So I'm going to scan this with my Lightning wallet. And it should give me 10 sats. So I can see it says 10 there. I press confirm. And on the wallet, I can see that if I go to my transaction list, I've received 10 sats. But obviously this UI hasn't updated. The game doesn't know that this is completed. So again, as we did with the invoice, we're going to look at checking the status of this. So I want to check the status, and this is very, very similar to what we did with the invoice. Copy and paste this so we don't have to watch me typing. We call the withdrawal request API, but we add the current ID that we grab here. It's a get request, and then we basically check if the status is, if it's pending, we check again in 2 seconds. If it's completed, we update the UI to show that, we have withdrawn. So if I reload now, I'm going to have to pay and play again. There's no shortcuts in this game. I just scan to pay it. Okay, single player. So I'll get a coin a little bit quicker this time. There's a coin. Don't want to blow myself up. So now when I press withdraw and I withdraw, the QR code should update once I've received the sats. It disappeared. There we go. Yeah, and now we can see the sats have gone back to 0. So that's basically how simple it is. I'm not sure how long that took, but I think it was less than 30 minutes. So obviously this is a very, very simple game, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the caveats, but the whole point of this project was the game is very, very simple. It's not a complicated game. The game code itself isn't very, very complicated, but it just can show you in 2 files how you can make a paywall or accept payments for your game or for your project, and how you can also send the player Bitcoin from your game or project. So hopefully with these 2 tools in your toolkit, it could help your hackathon project. It doesn't have to be a game. It can be, I don't know, you could make a website where people write articles and people have to pay to read the articles, stuff like that. You could maybe you could show an advert for a video streaming site. When the user watches an advert, they will be able to withdraw Bitcoin using this API. But we don't have to stop there. I'm going to stop there for the purpose of this workshop. But if you take a look at the ZEBEDEE API reference, there's a few other cool things that we can do. So if you want to look at the Lightning address API, so the Lightning address API is another API that you could possibly expand on this Bomberman project. So instead of showing a QR code at the end of the game for them to withdraw the sats, when the game starts, the user could enter their Lightning address. So a Lightning address is kind of like an email address for Lightning. So here's an example one. Here is Andre at ZEBEDEE.gg. If you download the ZEBEDEE wallet, other wallets like Wallet of Satoshi have it as well, it will give you a Lightning address. And you can basically send Bitcoin to people's Lightning address. So you could, for example, expand on this Bomberman game for example, in the beginning, you could have a box here where you asked the user to type their Lightning address in, they pay to play, and then when they get the sats, instead of showing the withdraw game at the end, you could actually call the send to Lightning address API here. Very, very simple. And then when they get a coin, it'll send the Bitcoin to them straight away, so they don't have to wait. They won't have to press a button to show a QR code. It literally, as you get the coin, you can call send, send, send. So there's loads of stuff that you can do. I just wanted to keep it simple for this workshop, and there we are. So I will hopefully give a link to the slide so you can read this in your own time. But the full reference code is at my GitHub, which is github.com, Mandel Monkey, Bitcoin Bomberman. The full working code is in the master branch, and the workshop code that we followed is in the workshop branch. So I hope that's very helpful to you, and good luck with your hackathon projects. I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with. Thank you.